I knew something was wrong the moment I opened my china cabinet and saw nothing but empty glass shelves staring back at me. My wedding china, every plate my late husband Robert had carefully chosen, was gone. My hands trembled as I drove to my son Michael's house, already dreading what I might find. But it wasn't just that Vanessa had taken them. It was what I saw when I looked into one single plate on her table. Something hidden in the reflection that wasn't meant for me to see. And in that moment I realized this wasn't about dishes. It was about something much darker. If this story is already making your heart uneasy, I'd love for you to stay with me. Maybe leave a like or share where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. And if you've ever had a moment where something small revealed a much bigger truth, tell me in the comments. I read everyone. There are some objects in a home that don't just sit quietly on shelves, they hold time inside them. For me, that was my wedding china. I still remember the day Robert brought it home. It was a soft spring afternoon in 1979, and we had only been married a week. I was still getting used to saying my husband out loud without smiling like a teenager. We didn't have much back then, just a small 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio. The floors creaked, the paint peeled in the corners, and the kitchen window stuck whenever it rained. But it was ours. Robert walked in that day carrying a large, carefully wrapped box, like it was something sacred. "What's that?" I asked, laughing, wiping my hands on a dish towel. He set it down on the table and looked at me with that same gentle seriousness he had whenever he was about to say something that mattered. "It's something we'll use for the rest of our lives," he said. Inside that box was the most beautiful china set I had ever seen. Not because it was extravagant, but because it was thoughtful. Soft ivory porcelain, edged with a delicate pattern of pale blue vines and tiny silver accents. Each piece felt smooth and balanced in my hands like it had been made with care, not just manufactured. "I can't believe you bought this," I told him. "We should be saving money, not spending it on dishes." Robert smiled that quiet, knowing smile. "It's not about the dishes, Wilma," he said. "It's about the moments we'll use them for." And he was right. We didn't use that china every day. It came out for birthdays, anniversaries, Thanksgiving dinners, and quiet Sunday evenings when life felt especially worth celebrating. Over the years, those plates held more than food. They held laughter, arguments, apologies, and everything in between. When Michael was born, I remember feeding him mashed sweet potatoes on one of those plates, even though I knew I shouldn't. Robert teased me for it. "Starting him off with fine dining early, huh?" he said. "Why not?" I replied. "He should know what matters." Back then, I thought what mattered was keeping traditions alive, keeping things whole. I didn't realize how fragile that idea really was. After Robert passed away 10 years ago, the house became quieter, in a way I still haven't gotten used to. Not just silent, but hollow. Like the walls themselves were waiting for something that would never come back. I kept the china exactly where it had always been, in the glass cabinet in the dining room. I would polish it once a month, even when I hadn't used it. Not because it needed it, but because I needed to feel like I was still taking care of something we had built together. Michael used to come by more often in those first few years after his father died. He'd sit at the kitchen table, drink coffee, and talk about work. Sometimes he'd stay for dinner and I'd bring out the china just like old times, but that changed after he met Vanessa. Vanessa was polished. That's the word I always come back to. Everything about her felt carefully curated, from her clothes to her tone of voice to the way she decorated her home. She worked in real estate, which made sense. She had a way of walking into a space and immediately assessing its value, not just financially, but socially. The first time she came to my house, she smiled politely as she looked around. her eyes moving quickly from one detail to another. "This place has potential," she said. I remember pausing for a moment, unsure how to respond. "Potential," I repeated. "Yes," she said, tilting her head slightly. "With some updates, it could be really beautiful." I wanted to tell her it already was, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled and offered her tea. She was always respectful on the surface. She never raised her voice, never said anything outright cruel. But there was something in the way she spoke, something subtle that made me feel like I was being slowly measured and found lacking. Too traditional, too sentimental, too old. Michael didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did and chose not to say anything. Over time, their visits became less frequent. Holidays were often spent at their house instead of mine. Vanessa said it was easier for hosting, which I understood in a practical sense. Their home was newer, more spacious, more impressive. But something about it always felt like a showroom to me. Everything in its place. Nothing out of line. No history. The last time they came over for dinner was about 3 months ago. I remember it clearly because that was the night Vanessa really noticed the china. I had set the table the way I always did for special occasions. The soft glow of the dining room light reflecting off the silver edges of the plates, the folded linen napkins, the small vase of fresh flowers in the center. Vanessa paused when she walked in. "Oh," she said, stepping closer to the table. "These are beautiful." Her fingers hovered just above one of the plates, not quite touching it. "Robert bought them for us when we got married," I said. She glanced up at me, her expression shifting just slightly. "They look antique," she said. "Are they? I suppose they are now," I replied with a small smile. She picked one up carefully, turning it slightly in the light. "Do you know how much a set like this is worth?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. "I've never thought about it in that way," I said. She let out a soft laugh. "You should," she said. "Pieces like this can be quite valuable, especially if they're well preserved." Michael shifted in his seat, glancing between us. "Vanessa," he said quietly, "it's just Mom's dishes." But she didn't look at him. She was still studying the plate. "It's more than that," she said. "It's an asset." I felt something tighten in my chest at that word, asset. Not memory, not history, not love. Just something that could be measured, priced, and eventually sold. I tried to brush it off. People see things differently, I told myself. It didn't mean anything. But later that evening, as I was clearing the table, I noticed something that stayed with me. Vanessa was standing near the cabinet, her phone held low in her hand. At first, I thought she was checking a message, but then I saw the angle of the camera. She was taking pictures, one by one, each plate, each bowl, each detail. She moved carefully, making sure the lighting was just right. I stood there for a moment watching her without saying anything. And in that quiet, uncomfortable space, a feeling settled over me, one I couldn't quite explain yet. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even suspicion, not fully. It was something deeper, a sense that something had just begun, something I didn't understand yet, but would soon have no choice but to face. The next time I saw Michael and Vanessa, I told myself I wouldn't read too much into anything. People take pictures of things all the time now. Maybe Vanessa just liked the design. Maybe she wanted something similar for her own home. Maybe I was letting loneliness twist ordinary moments into something heavier than they were. That's what I told myself. But the truth is, once you notice something, you can't unsee it. They came over again the following Sunday, just the two of them. I had spent the morning cooking roasted chicken green beans with almonds, mashed potatoes, the way Michael liked them when he was little. I even made his favorite apple pie, the same recipe I had used since he was 8 years old. I set the table with the china again. Not to impress Vanessa, but because it made me feel like Robert was still part of the room somehow. When they arrived, Vanessa greeted me with a quick hug that felt more like a gesture than an emotion. "Smells wonderful in here," she said, stepping inside and glancing around as if assessing the space all over again. Michael kissed my cheek. "Hey, Mom." His voice was warm, but there was something underneath it, something distracted. We sat down to eat, and for a while, everything felt almost normal. Michael talked about work, about a new client he was struggling to keep happy. Vanessa chimed in occasionally, offering suggestions in that polished, confident tone of hers. Then, as if following a script I hadn't been given, her attention drifted back to the table, to the china. She picked up her fork, paused, then looked at the plate beneath it. "You really keep these in incredible condition," she said. "Thank you," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "They must be, 40 years old?" she asked. 47, I said. She gave a small, impressed nod. "That's amazing," she said. "Most people don't take care of things that long." I smiled faintly. "Some things are worth taking care of." She met my eyes then, and for a brief second something passed between us, something unspoken, something sharp. "Yes," she said. "Some things are." There was a pause. Michael shifted again, cutting into his chicken a little too quickly. Vanessa set her fork down. "Have you ever had them appraised?" she asked. The question landed heavier this time. "No," I said. "Like I told you before, I've never really thought about selling them." "I'm not saying you should," she replied smoothly. "But it's always smart to know what you have, especially at this stage of life." At this stage of life? I felt my back straighten slightly. "And what stage is that?" I asked, my voice calm but firmer than before. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You know," she said, "planning ahead, simplifying, making things easier." For whom I asked. The room went quiet. Michael looked up at me, then at Vanessa. "Mom," he started, but stopped when Vanessa lifted her hand slightly as if to signal she had it under control. "For everyone," she said. "For you. For Michael. For the future." I let out a slow breath. "The future doesn't need my dishes," I said. Vanessa tilted her head, studying me. "It's not about the dishes," she said. "It's about being practical." There it was again. Practical. I had heard that word so many times from her, always used in the same way to gently dismiss anything rooted in emotion. "I've managed just fine so far," I replied. "I'm sure you have," she said quickly. "But things change." Michael finally spoke up. "Vanessa, can we not do this right now?" he said, his voice low. Do what she asked, turning to him. "Make everything about logistics," he said. She blinked, clearly surprised. "I'm just trying to help," she said. "I know," he replied, softer now. "But it doesn't always feel like help." For a moment I saw something in my son I hadn't seen in a while, a flicker of the boy he used to be, the one who would stand up when something felt unfair. But it disappeared just as quickly. Vanessa gave a small, tight smile and picked up her fork again. "Of course," she said. "Let's just enjoy dinner." We finished the meal in a kind of careful silence. The conversation stayed on safe topics, whether work, a television show Vanessa had been watching. But the tension never fully left the room. After dessert, I stood up to start clearing the table. "Let me help," Vanessa said, rising as well. I hesitated for a second, then nodded. "Thank you." We moved around each other in the kitchen, passing plates, stacking dishes. She handled the china with surprising care, almost reverence. but something about it felt performative, like she was proving a point. At one point, she held up one of the plates, turning it slightly in the light again. "It really is beautiful," she said quietly. "It is," I replied. She looked at me over the edge of the plate. "You've kept it all these years," she said. "That takes dedication." "It takes love," I corrected gently. She paused, then smiled. "Yes," she said. "That too." A few minutes later, as I was rinsing dishes at the sink, I heard the faint familiar sound of a phone camera. I turned slightly. There she was again, standing near the counter, holding one of the plates at just the right angle, her phone raised discreetly. Click. She didn't notice me watching this time. Or maybe she did and chose not to care. I dried my hands slowly, my mind racing. "Vanessa," I said, keeping my voice even. "Why are you taking pictures of my china?" She didn't flinch. Instead, she lowered her phone calmly and turned toward me. "Oh," she said lightly. "I have a friend who's an interior designer. She loves vintage pieces. I thought she might appreciate seeing these." Just seeing them, I asked. "Of course," she said. "What else would it be?" Her tone was smooth, almost amused, as if the question itself was unnecessary. I held her gaze for a moment, searching for something, anything that felt genuine. But all I saw was that same polished surface, reflective, carefully controlled. I nodded slowly. "I see." Michael walked in just then, breaking the moment. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Of course," Vanessa said before I could answer. "We were just talking about how lovely your mother's china is." He smiled, relieved. "Yeah," he said. "Dad always loved that set." There was a softness in his voice when he mentioned Robert, and for a second I wondered if he remembered what those dishes really meant. Or if they had already become something else in his mind too. Something less personal, something transferable. They left not long after that. Vanessa hugged me again just as lightly as before. "We should do this more often," she said. "Yes," I replied. "We should." But as I closed the door behind them and stood alone in the quiet house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would notice, but enough. Enough that the next time I looked at my china cabinet, I wouldn't just see plates. I would see a line that had been crossed, and a question I could no longer ignore. Why did she need those pictures so badly? The morning I found the cabinet empty, the house felt wrong. Not loud, not broken, just wrong. I had woken up earlier than usual sometime before sunrise, the way I often did these days. Sleep came in shorter stretches now, interrupted by memories that didn't ask permission. I made myself a cup of coffee, wrapped my hands around the mug, and stood by the kitchen window watching the soft gray light settle over the backyard. It was quiet, peaceful, normal. That's what made what came next feel so unsettling. I walked into the dining room out of habit. I hadn't planned to go in there. It was just part of my routine, like checking the mail or turning off the porch light. My eyes drifted toward the cabinet without thinking. And then I stopped. At first, my mind didn't understand what I was seeing. The glass doors were slightly ajar. Inside, nothing. No plates, no bowls, no serving dishes, just empty shelves, faint outlines where the china had once rested, like ghosts of something that had been carefully removed. I stood there for a long moment, my coffee cooling in my hands. No, that wasn't possible. I stepped closer, my heart beginning to beat faster. Maybe I had moved them. Maybe I had taken them out for cleaning and forgotten. Maybe no, I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. My fingers trembled as I reached for the cabinet door and pulled it open wider. The hinges creaked softly, the sound echoing louder than it should have in the quiet room. Empty. Completely empty. A strange, hollow feeling spread through my chest. Not panic, not yet. Something colder. Something sharper. I set my coffee down on the table and reached for my phone. I didn't hesitate. I called Michael. It rang twice before he picked up. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice thick with sleep. "Michael," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Where is my china?" There was a pause. A small one, but long enough. "What do you mean?" he asked. "My china," I repeated. "It's gone. The cabinet is empty." Another pause. Then a quiet exhale. "Oh," he said. That. As if we were talking about a missing towel. "Vanessa borrowed it," he continued. "She's hosting a brunch today and wanted to use something nicer than what we have." I felt my grip tighten around the phone. "She borrowed it," I repeated slowly. "Yeah," he said. "We were going to tell you. Things got busy." "You were going to tell me?" I said, my voice lower now, after taking every single piece out of my home without asking. "It's not like that, Mom," he said quickly. "She just thought, I don't care what she thought." I interrupted, the words coming out sharper than I intended. Those were not hers to take. There was a silence on the other end. Then softer now, almost pleading. "Mom, it's just for today. We'll bring everything back tonight. I promise. Promises." I had heard that tone before. The same one he used when he was a teenager trying to smooth over something he knew he shouldn't have done. Only now it felt different. He wasn't a boy anymore, and this wasn't a small mistake. "You should have asked," I said quietly. I know he replied. "I'm sorry." I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying myself. "Where are you?" I asked. "At home. Getting ready." "I'm coming over," I said. "Mom, you don't have to." "I'm coming over," I repeated. He didn't argue after that. "Okay," he said finally. "We'll be here." I ended the call and stood there for a moment, staring at the empty cabinet again. It wasn't just the absence of the china that unsettled me. It was the ease of it, the assumption, as if my things, my memories, were already theirs to move, to use, to decide the value of. I grabbed my keys. The drive to their house felt longer than usual, even though it was only 20 minutes away. Every red light felt like an interruption. Every passing car felt too slow. I kept replaying Michael's words in my head. She borrowed it. Borrowed. Without asking. Without telling me. Without thinking, at least not about how it would feel to walk into a room and find something that mattered to you. Gone. When I pulled into their driveway, I noticed the first sign that this wasn't just a small gathering. Cars lined the street. More than I expected. Voices drifted from inside the house light and cheerful. Laughter. I sat in my car for a moment, my hands resting on the steering wheel. Then I took a breath and stepped out. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. I walked in without knocking. The house was filled with people, well-dressed, casually elegant, holding glasses of orange juice and coffee, chatting in small clusters. The air smelled like fresh pastries and something citrusy. For a second, no one noticed me. Then Michael appeared from the kitchen. "Mom," he said, his expression shifting from surprise to something else, something more tense. "You made it." "I said I would," I replied. His eyes flicked toward the dining area behind me. "Come on," he said, lowering his voice. "Let's talk for a second." But I didn't move, because I had already seen it. the table, set perfectly in the center of the room, and on it, my china. Every piece arranged with precision gleaming under the soft overhead light. The plates, the bowls, the serving dishes, all placed as if they had always belonged there. As if they had always belonged to her. Vanessa stood at the head of the table laughing with a group of women. She looked comfortable, confident, at ease in a way that told me she saw nothing wrong with any of this. Then she noticed me. Her smile didn't falter. Instead, she excused herself from the group and walked toward me, her heels clicking softly against the floor. "Wilma," she said warmly, as if I had been invited. "What a nice surprise." A surprise I echoed. She tilted her head slightly. "Well, we didn't expect you this morning," she said. "But I'm glad you came. You can see how beautifully everything came together." She gestured toward the table. "Toward my china." I followed her gaze, my chest tightening. "It does look put together," I said carefully. "I knew it would," she replied. "These pieces really elevate the whole setting. Elevate. As if they were props." Michael stepped closer, his voice low. "Mom, we were going to bring everything back tonight," he said again. "I heard you," I replied, not taking my eyes off the table. Vanessa smiled, folding her hands lightly in front of her. "You really should see it as a compliment," she said. "Not everyone has something like this. It would be a shame for it to just sit in a cabinet." I turned to look at her. "It wasn't just sitting," I said. "It was where it belonged." She held my gaze, her expression still calm, still composed. "Things don't always stay where they belong," she said softly. "Sometimes they move on." There it was again, that subtle shift, that quiet sense of ownership, as if she was already speaking about the future, about a time when I wouldn't be here to object. I felt something settle inside me then. Not anger, not yet. Something steadier, something clearer. "You should have asked," I said again, my voice firm this time. Vanessa's smile tightened just slightly. "We're family," she said. "We don't need to be so formal about everything." "Respect isn't formal," I replied. The room around us seemed to quiet just a little, conversations dipping as a few nearby guests sensed the change in tone. Vanessa's eyes flicked briefly toward them, then back to me. "Of course," she said smoothly, "and I do respect you. That's why I wanted to showcase something so meaningful." Showcase. I looked past her back at the table, at the plates. At one in particular, the large serving plate placed at the center. The light hit it just right, its glossy surface reflecting the room around it. People moving, glasses clinking, and something else, something small, something out of place. I took a step closer, my eyes narrowing slightly. For a brief moment, the reflection shifted, and I caught it. Not a person, not a decoration, but a flicker of light from across the room, from the direction of the kitchen counter, where a laptop sat open, my breath caught in my throat. I couldn't see it directly from where I stood, but in that reflection, I saw enough. Enough to know this wasn't just a borrowed set of dishes. This was something planned, something deliberate, and whatever was on that screen, Vanessa hadn't meant for me to see it. I didn't move right away. If I had taken another step, turned my head, walked straight into the kitchen, and looked at that laptop directly, I might have missed everything. Because what I saw in that moment wasn't meant to be seen head on. It was revealed in reflection. Quietly. Accidentally. Truth has a way of doing that. I stood there pretending to smooth the edge of the tablecloth, my fingers brushing lightly against the fabric as my eyes stayed fixed on that serving plate. The glossy surface held more than just the room. It held angles, fragments, pieces of something I wasn't supposed to notice. And there it was again, the screen, open, bright, not a blank page, not email, something structured, boxes, lines, images. My heart began to pound, not fast, but heavy, deliberate. I leaned slightly closer as if adjusting one of the plates, careful not to draw attention. The reflection sharpened. I saw a photograph of the china. My china. Taken from above, carefully staged the same angle Vanessa had used when she was photographing them in my kitchen. Below the image text, small but readable in fragments. Vintage porcelain set. Excellent condition. Complete collection. Inherited. Inherited. The word hit me like something physical, my fingers stilled on the edge of the table. Inherited. Not owned. Not borrowed. Already reassigned. I swallowed slowly, forcing myself to stay calm, to stay still. There was more. A price range listed beneath the description. Numbers that made my stomach tighten. But it wasn't just the money. It was the category. The heading at the top of the page came into focus just enough for me to read 2 words clearly: estate liquidation. For a second, I thought I had misunderstood. Maybe it was a template, a default category. Maybe no. I knew what those words meant. I had seen them before years ago when a neighbor passed away and her children sold everything she owned in a matter of weeks. Furniture, clothes, photographs, memories reduced to line items. I straightened slowly, my chest tightening with something deeper now. Not confusion, not even anger, recognition. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't Vanessa borrowing something for a brunch. This was preparation, calculation. I turned my head slightly, just enough to glance toward the kitchen without making it obvious. The laptop sat open on the counter, angled away from the main room, but not completely. From where I stood, I couldn't read the full screen directly. But I didn't need to anymore. I had seen enough. I stepped back from the table, my hand brushing the edge of the serving plate one last time. Cool, smooth, familiar. It had been at the center of so many meals, so many moments, and now it had become something else entirely. A mirror, a warning. Wilma Vanessa's voice pulled me back. I turned to face her, arranging my expression carefully. "Yes," I said. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked, her tone light, unaware, or pretending to be unaware of what I had just seen. "No, thank you," I replied. "I'm fine." She studied me for a second as if sensing something had shifted, but if she did, she didn't show it. "Well," she said, glancing around the room, "feel free to join us. Everyone's been admiring the table." I followed her gaze briefly. A few guests stood nearby, their eyes drifting toward the china toward me. Curious. Appraising. One woman smiled politely. "These are stunning," she said. "You must be very proud." I returned the smile, though it felt distant. "They hold a lot of history," I said. Vanessa stepped in smoothly. "And now they're finally being appreciated," she added. There it was again, that subtle shift. From mine to something shared. Something transitional. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned slightly and looked at Michael, who had been standing just a few steps away, watching the exchange with a tightness in his posture. "Michael," I said quietly, "may I speak with you for a moment?" He nodded quickly. "Yeah, of course." We stepped into the hallway away from the noise of the brunch. The moment we were alone, I turned to him fully. "Did you know I asked?" His brow furrowed. Know what I held his gaze? "About what Vanessa is doing with my china." He hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. "Mom, she's just," he began. "Don't," I said softly. "Please, don't give me a version that makes this easier to say." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know exactly what you think is happening," he said carefully. "But she's been talking about maybe getting things appraised. That's all." "Appraised," I repeated. "That's normal, Mom," he said. "People do that." "And listing them," I asked. His eyes flicked away. "Listing what my china," I said, "as part of an estate liquidation." The words hung between us. Heavy. He went still. He started, then stopped. "You didn't know," I said. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. His silence confirmed it. "No," he said finally, his voice low. "I didn't." I studied his face. There was confusion there, unease, and something else. Fear. "Michael," I said gently, "what has she told you?" He hesitated again. Then slowly, She said, "You'd been talking about downsizing," he admitted. "About maybe moving somewhere smaller, somewhere with less upkeep." I never said that I replied. I know he said quickly. I mean, I didn't question it at the time. It sounded reasonable. Reasonable. Another word Vanessa liked to use. "Did she mention assisted living?" I asked. His eyes widened slightly. "Yes," he said. "And you believed her?" I asked, not harshly, but honestly. He swallowed. "I didn't think she would lie about something like that," he said. I nodded slowly. "Of course he didn't. That was the problem." I placed my hand lightly on his arm. "Michael," I said, "she's not just thinking about the future." He looked at me, his expression uncertain. "What do you mean?" I held his gaze. "She's planning it," I said. He frowned. "Planning what?" I took a breath, then said it plainly. "A version of my life where I'm no longer in this house, and everything in it becomes available." He stared at me. "That's not," he began. "Look at me," I said quietly. He did. I saw the listing, I said, reflected in the plate. His face changed, not instantly, but slowly, like something inside him was rearranging itself. "She wouldn't." He started again, but this time the certainty wasn't there. "She already is," I said. Silence filled the hallway. From the other room, laughter continued. Glasses clinked. Someone said something that drew a round of soft applause. Life going on. As if nothing had shifted. But everything had. Michael leaned back slightly against the wall, his shoulders dropping. I didn't know, he said again, quieter this time. "I believe you," I replied. And I did. That was the part that hurt the most. Not just what Vanessa was doing, but how easily she had done it, without him seeing, without him stopping her. I straightened, smoothing my hands over the front of my blouse. "All right," I said. Michael blinked. "What do you mean, I mean?" I replied calmly. "I'm not going to make a scene here." His expression flickered with relief. "But that doesn't mean I'm going to ignore it," I added. The relief faded. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I looked past him toward the dining room, toward the table, toward the serving plate. "I'm going to watch," I said. My voice was steady now, clear. and I'm going to listen." I met his eyes one more time, and then I said softly, "I'm going to decide exactly how much of this was a mistake and how much was a plan." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because deep down, I think he already knew. And for the first time since I had walked into that house, I felt something shift inside me. Not fear, not confusion, but something sharper, stronger, awake. Because whatever Vanessa thought she was doing, she had just made one mistake. She had assumed I wouldn't see it. She had assumed I wouldn't understand it. And most of all, she had assumed I wouldn't do anything about it. She was wrong. I didn't confront Vanessa that morning. Every instinct in me, every part of me that had spent decades protecting my home, my family, my sense of right and wrong, wanted to walk back into that dining room, close her laptop, and ask her plainly and publicly what she thought she was doing. But I didn't. Because something told me that if I did, I would lose the advantage, and for the first time in a very long time, I understood that this wasn't just about hurt feelings or crossed boundaries. This was strategy. So I stayed. I smiled when spoken to. I nodded at polite compliments about the food and the table setting, though none of it was mine to claim anymore. I listened. More importantly, I watched. Vanessa moved through the room like someone entirely in control of the narrative. She laughed easily, her voice just the right pitch, warm but not loud, confident but not overbearing. She introduced people to one another, mentioned listings she had recently closed, spoke about market trends as if she were giving a seminar, and every so often, her eyes drifted back to the table, to the china, not with affection, with assessment. At one point, she guided a man in his early 50s, tall, neatly dressed, with the kind of posture that comes from years of evaluating things toward the table. "This is the set I mentioned," she said. I moved a little closer without making it obvious, pretending to adjust the arrangement of napkins near the edge. The man leaned slightly over the table, studying the plates with careful attention. "Very well preserved," he said. "No visible chipping. The glaze is still intact." He spoke like someone who had done this many times before. "Exactly," Vanessa replied. "It's been kept in a controlled environment for decades." I almost laughed at that. Controlled environment. As if my dining room had been a vault, not a place filled with life. "And the full set is here?" he asked. "Complete," she said. "Serving pieces included." I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't hypothetical. This wasn't curiosity. This was negotiation. I stepped forward just enough to enter their space. "It was complete," I said gently. Vanessa turned, her smile tightening for a fraction of a second before settling back into place. "Wilma," she said, her tone smooth, "we were just discussing how remarkable your collection is." The man looked at me, offering a polite nod. "Ethan Cole," he said. "I own a gallery specializing in vintage and estate pieces." Of course he did. I returned the nod. "Wilma Hayes," I replied. "A pleasure," he said. "You've taken exceptional care of these." "Thank you," I said. Vanessa stepped in again, her voice light. "Wilma's always been very attentive to her things. Attentive, not loving, not intentional, just attentive." I let it pass. "For now," I added quietly. Vanessa's eyes flicked toward me again. "For now," she echoed. I smiled. "Everything changes, doesn't it?" I said. For a brief moment, we looked at each other without speaking, and in that silence, something shifted. She wasn't sure anymore. Not entirely. "Good." Ethan cleared his throat slightly, sensing the tension. Well, he said, if you ever decide to have the set formally appraised, I'd be happy to assist. Vanessa opened her mouth to respond, but I spoke first. I'll keep that in mind, I said. She glanced at me surprised, then recovered. Of course, she said. We're just exploring options. Exploring. I nodded. Of course you are. The conversation drifted after that, but I had heard enough. More than enough. Later, I found myself near the kitchen again, standing close enough to the counter to see the laptop without needing the reflection this time. The screen had changed. Different window, but the same intent. Tabs open across the top auction site's appraisal services legal templates. One tab partially visible caught my attention. Power of attorney. Authorization form. My breath caught. I didn't need to click it. I didn't need to read the fine print. The implication was clear. This wasn't just about selling a set of dishes. This was about control. Control of decisions, of assets, of me. I stepped back slowly, my mind already moving faster now, connecting pieces that had felt separate before. The comments about assisted living, the talk of downsizing, the listing draft, and now, legal authority. A plan, not rushed, not emotional, carefully built, piece by piece. Enjoying yourself? Vanessa's voice came from behind me. I turned, meeting her gaze. I am, I said calmly. She studied me for a moment. You've been very quiet, she said. I've been listening, I replied. That can be dangerous, she said lightly, though there was an edge beneath it. It depends on what you hear, I said. Another pause. Longer this time. She stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough that it wouldn't carry. I hope you understand, she said, that everything I'm doing is with the future in mind. Whose future, I asked. Our families, she said without hesitation. I held her gaze. And where exactly do I fit into that, I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, you'll be taken care of, she said. Taken care of. Not asked. Not included. Handled. I nodded slowly. I see, I said. Michael appeared, then his expression tense. Everything okay? He asked. Of course, Vanessa said smoothly. We were just talking about plans. He looked at me. Mom. I gave him a small reassuring smile. We were, I said. He didn't look convinced. Good. He shouldn't. Because something was changing. Not just in what I was seeing, but in how I was seeing it. For years I had assumed that love family meant giving people the benefit of the doubt, trusting their intentions, believing that even when mistakes were made, they came from a place of care. But standing there in that kitchen looking at that open laptop, I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit. Intentions can be hidden, care can be performed, and trust, once given blindly, can be used. I spent another half hour at the brunch, long enough to observe, to listen, to let the full shape of what was happening settle into place. Then I picked up my purse. I'm going to head home, I said. Michael looked surprised. So soon I've seen what I needed to see, I replied. Vanessa stepped forward. We'll bring everything back tonight, she said, her tone reassuring. I looked at her. I'm sure you will, I said. But this time my voice held something different. Not belief, expectation, and something else. A quiet warning. I walked toward the door, Michael following me outside. Mom, he said, his voice low, urgent. What are you thinking? I turned to him. I'm thinking, I said carefully, that there are conversations we need to have. With Vanessa, he asked. Eventually, I said. He swallowed. And with me, I held his gaze. Yes, I said. Especially with you. He nodded slowly. I didn't know, he said again. I know, I replied, but knowing wasn't enough anymore. As I drove home, the house didn't feel empty the way it had that morning. It felt different. Not violated. Not yet. But no longer untouched. I walked into the dining room and stood in front of the cabinet. Empty shelves. Waiting. I reached out and closed the glass doors gently. The reflections stared back at me, older than I remembered, softer in some ways, stronger in others. For the first time since this began, I allowed myself to say it out loud. This isn't over, because it wasn't, not even close. In fact, it had only just begun. I didn't call anyone that afternoon, not Michael, not Vanessa. Not even the lawyer whose name had been sitting quietly in the back of my mind since I left the house. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I sat. Really sat. No television, no radio, no distractions. Just me in the quiet of the living room with a cup of tea growing cold in my hands. There's a difference between reacting and understanding. For years, I had reacted to things, small comments, subtle dismissals, the gradual shift in how my son spoke to me after he got married. I had adjusted, softened, told myself it was just part of life moving forward. But this required understanding, because what I had seen wasn't just a moment of poor judgment. It was a pattern, and patterns don't appear overnight. They build, piece by piece. I closed my eyes and let my mind move backward, replaying the past year with a clarity that only comes when you stop trying to protect yourself from what you might find. Vanessa's comments about my house, this place has potential, her suggestions about simplifying. Wouldn't it be easier to have less to maintain, the way she had asked about my finances once casually, as if it were a normal conversation? Have you thought about consolidating your accounts? At the time, I had brushed it off. She worked in real estate. She thought in terms of assets, investments, efficiency. It wasn't personal. That's what I told myself. But now I could see the thread connecting it all. It had always been about positioning, understanding what I had, understanding what could be moved, and most importantly, understanding how to gain access. My eyes opened slowly. On the coffee table in front of me sat an old photo album. I hadn't touched it in years, but something about this moment pulled me toward it. I reached out and opened it. The first page held a photograph from our wedding day. Robert standing beside me, his hand resting gently over mine. We were both younger than Michael is now, full of certainty about things we couldn't possibly have understood yet. I traced the edge of the photo with my finger. You saw things more clearly than I did, didn't you? I murmured softly. Robert had always been the one who thought ahead, planned carefully. Not out of fear, but out of responsibility. There were things he used to say that I didn't fully appreciate at the time. People don't always show you who they are right away, Wilma, he once told me. Sometimes they show you who they need to be, until they don't need to anymore. I used to think that was a little too cautious. Now I wondered if it had been exactly right. I turned another page in the album. Michael as a boy sitting at the dining table with a spoon too big for his hand, grinning as mashed potatoes slid off the edge of one of those china plates. He had been such a kind child, gentle, quick to apologize even when things weren't his fault. I felt a tightness in my chest. That part of him hadn't disappeared, but it had been overshadowed, not erased. Just buried under something else, something quieter, something more uncertain. I closed the album and set it aside. If Vanessa had built a plan around him, it wasn't because he was cruel. It was because he was easy to influence. That realization hurt more than anything else, because it meant that this wasn't just about what Vanessa was doing. It was about what Michael was allowing, and that was something I couldn't ignore anymore. I stood up slowly and walked toward the small desk in the corner of the room. Inside the top drawer were documents I hadn't looked at in years: bank statements, insurance papers, copies of things Robert had organized before he passed. I pulled the drawer open and began sorting through them. At first it felt routine, familiar. But then I noticed something. A folder I didn't immediately recognize. Plain. Unlabeled. That wasn't like Robert. He labeled everything. Carefully. Precisely. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were a few documents neatly arranged. At the top was a copy of our will. Nothing unusual there. But beneath it, something else. A letter. Folded once. My name written on the front in Robert's handwriting. My breath caught. I didn't remember seeing this before. My fingers hesitated for just a moment before unfolding it. Wilma, it began. If you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to explain things the way I wanted to. I sank into the chair, my heart beginning to beat faster, not with fear, but with something deeper. Recognition. You've always believed the best in people, the letter continued. That's one of the reasons I love you, but it's also the reason I worry about you. I swallowed. I've made a few decisions about our assets that might seem unnecessary now, he wrote, but I trust that one day you'll understand why. My eyes moved quickly across the page. There are things I've set aside protected in ways that aren't obvious. Not because I expect something bad to happen, but because I know life doesn't always unfold the way we hope it will. Protected. In ways that aren't obvious. My mind flashed back to the serving plate, to the weight of it in my hands, to the way Robert had once said almost jokingly, "One plate holds more than dinner." I felt a chill run through me. Could it be? I looked back down at the letter. If you ever feel uncertain, he wrote, look at the things we chose together. Not just what they are, but why we kept them. My chest tightened. He hadn't been talking about money. Not directly. He had been talking about meaning, about intention, about hidden layers. I folded the letter carefully, my hands steady now. For the first time since this began, something shifted inside me. Not just awareness. Direction. This wasn't just about stopping Vanessa. It was about understanding what Robert had already put in place, and why. I stood up and walked slowly back into the dining room. The cabinet stood there empty, waiting. But now it didn't feel like something had been taken from me. It felt like something had been revealed. I placed my hand gently against the glass. You knew, I whispered. Not about Vanessa, not specifically, but about the possibility, about the vulnerability, about the fact that one day I might need to see more clearly than I wanted to. And now I did. I turned away from the cabinet and reached for my phone. This time I didn't hesitate. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I hadn't used in years. Linda Brooks, attorney, friend, someone Robert trusted. The phone rang once, twice. Then Wilma, her voice came through surprised but warm. It's been a long time. Yes, I said softly. It has. There was a brief pause. Then her tone shifted just slightly. What's going on? She asked. I took a breath. Not rushed, not emotional. Clear. I think I said carefully, I need to understand exactly what my options are. before someone else decides them for me. Another pause. Then, "You're right to call," Linda said. "Start from the beginning." I glanced toward the dining room one more time, toward the empty space where the china used to be, and the space where something much bigger had just begun. "I will," I said. And this time, I meant everything. Linda didn't interrupt me once. Not while I explained the missing china. Not when I described the brunch, the open laptop, the listing draft, the words estate liquidation reflected in that serving plate. Not even when I told her about the tab labeled power of attorney. She just listened. The way good lawyers do. The way old friends do when they know something serious is unfolding. When I finally stopped, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Linda exhaled slowly. "Wilma," she said, her voice measured, "you were right to call me." I closed my eyes for a moment, leaning back in the chair. "I was afraid you'd say that," I replied. "Tell me one thing," she continued. "Have you signed anything recently? Any documents Vanessa or Michael may have presented to you? Something that felt routine?" "No," I said firmly. "Nothing." "Good," she said. "That helps." "Helps." I opened my eyes again, staring at the empty cabinet across the room. "How bad is this?" I asked quietly. Another pause. "It could be very bad," she said. "Or it could still be contained. It depends on how far she's gone and how quickly we move." That word grounded me. "I found a letter from Robert," I said. "He mentioned protecting things in ways that aren't obvious." There was a shift in Linda's tone immediately. "Did he?" Now she said softly. "That sounds like him. You knew I asked." "I knew he was thorough," she replied. "He came to me a few months before he passed. We reviewed your estate plan together." My breath caught. "You never told me that." "He asked me not to," she said gently. "Not unless you needed to know." I sat up straighter. "And do I need to know now?" I asked. "Yes," she said. There was no hesitation in her voice. "Then tell me," I said. "All right," Linda continued. "First, let's address what's in front of us. If Vanessa is already drafting listings and exploring legal documents like power of attorney, she's not just curious, she's building a pathway to control." I swallowed. "I thought so." Second, she went on. "If she's telling others that you're considering assisted living, she's creating a narrative. One that justifies her involvement in your decisions." My chest tightened. "She told Michael that too." "I'm not surprised," Linda said. "It's a common tactic, soften the ground before you take action." Softening the ground. That's exactly what it felt like something had been prepared slowly, carefully, until it seemed almost natural. "What about the china?" I asked. "Technically, it's your property," she said. "Removing it without permission is already questionable. Attempting to sell it under false pretenses, especially if she's representing it as inherited, could cross into fraud." Fraud. The word felt heavy, real. "This isn't just about the dishes, is it?" I said quietly. "No," Linda replied. "It rarely is." Silence settled between us again. Then she spoke more softly. Now she said, "Let's talk about Robert." I leaned forward slightly, my heart beginning to beat faster. "There are a few protections he put in place," she continued. "Not because he distrusted anyone specifically, but because he understood how quickly circumstances can change." "What kind of protections?" I asked. "A combination of legal structures and physical safeguards," she said. "Physical!" My mind flashed immediately to the serving plate, to the weight of it, to the way it had always felt just slightly different from the others. Wilma said, "Do you remember Robert ever mentioning something about hidden storage or secure access?" I stood up slowly. I remember him saying, "One plate holds more than dinner," I said. There was a small pause. Then Linda let out a quiet breath. "That would be it," she said. My fingers tightened around the phone. "It is I asked." "Yes," she replied. He had a custom modification done to one of the serving pieces. Not obvious. Not something anyone would notice unless they knew where to look. My heart began to race now. He didn't tell me, I said. He didn't tell anyone, Linda said. Except me. And even then only in broad terms. "What's inside?" I asked. "I don't know exactly," she said. "He didn't specify, but he told me it would contain everything you might need if things ever became complicated." Complicated. That felt like an understatement now. I turned slowly, looking toward the front door, as if I could somehow see through it back to Michael's house, back to that table, back to that plate. "It's still there," I said. "What is?" Linda asked. "The plate," I replied. "Vanessa has it." There was a brief silence. Then, "All right," Linda said, her tone shifting into something more focused. "Then we need to proceed carefully." "How?" I asked. "You cannot confront her directly yet," she said. "If she suspects that you know what she's doing or that there's something valuable hidden, she could act quickly, sell things, move assets, even push harder on the legal side." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I understand. Your advantage right now," she continued, "is that she believes she's in control. We don't want to take that away too soon." "Then what do we do?" I asked. "We observe," she said. "We document. And we prepare." Prepare. The word settled into me like something solid. "I can do that," I said. "I know you can," Linda replied. "And Wilma." "Yes." "You're not as vulnerable as she thinks you are." For the first time since that morning, I felt something close to strength rise in my chest. I'm starting to realize that I said. "Good," she replied. "Because the next steps are going to require clarity, not emotion." "I understand. We'll meet in person tomorrow," she said. "Bring everything you found, the letter, any documents, anything that feels out of place." "I will." "And Wilma." "Yes. If that plate is what I think it is, we need to get it back. Intact." I looked down at my hands. "Steady now." "I will," I said. After we hung up, I stood there for a long moment, the phone still in my hand. The house was quiet again, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt charged, like something was waiting. I walked back into the dining room and stood in front of the cabinet once more. Empty shelves. But now, I could almost see it. The way the pieces had been arranged. The way that one serving plate had always sat just slightly forward. As if it mattered more. As if it held something. I closed my eyes and let the memory come back fully. Robert in the kitchen years ago, holding that plate in his hands, turning it slightly, smiling in that quiet, thoughtful way of his. "You don't always see what's right in front of you," he had said once. I had laughed at the time. Now I understood. I opened my eyes. "This isn't just about stopping her," I said softly to the empty room. It was about something bigger. Something Robert had prepared for, something I was only just beginning to understand. I reached out and touched the cabinet door lightly. Tomorrow I would meet with Linda. Tomorrow I would start putting things into place. But tonight I needed to be ready. Because the next time I walked into Michael's house, I wouldn't be there as a guest. I would be there with purpose. And this time, I would be the one who knew exactly what I was looking for. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind refused to be still. Every detail from the past few days replayed itself in sharper focus now. The cabinet, the brunch, the reflection in the plate, the open tabs on Vanessa's laptop, and most of all, Robert's letter. Everything you might need if things ever became complicated. Complicated. I let out a quiet breath in the darkness. He had chosen that word carefully, not dangerous, not urgent, just complicated. Because Robert had never believed in panic. He believed in preparation. And now for the first time since he was gone, I felt like I was stepping into the part of our life he had prepared for me without ever fully explaining. Morning came slowly. I dressed with more intention than usual. Nothing extravagant, just a simple navy blouse and slacks. But I chose them carefully. Something steady. Something that reminded me of who I was before all of this began. Before I doubted my own instincts. Before I let someone else define what was practical. I gathered the letter, the folder of documents, and my purse, then drove to meet Linda. Her office hadn't changed much in the years since I'd last been there. It was still tucked into the corner of a quiet brick building downtown, the kind of place that didn't advertise itself loudly but didn't need to. Inside, everything felt deliberate dark wood clean-lined shelves filled with neatly arranged files. No clutter, no distractions. Linda greeted me at the door. "Wilma," she said, stepping forward and placing a hand gently on my arm. "You look steady." I managed a small smile. "I feel clearer than I did yesterday," I said. "That's a good start," she replied. We sat across from each other at her desk, and I handed her the letter first. She read it slowly, her expression shifting only slightly as she moved through each line. When she finished, she folded it carefully and set it down. "He was a careful man," she said. "Yes," I replied. "I'm starting to understand just how careful." She nodded. "Let's talk about what that means for you now." I leaned forward slightly. "I'm listening." "First," she said, "you are not in immediate legal danger. You haven't signed anything. There's no active power of attorney. That gives us time. Time for what I asked. For you to regain control of the situation," she said. I let that settle. Control. Not confrontation. Not defense. Control. Second, she continued, "If Robert hid something within that plate, it was intentional. He wanted you to have access to it when necessary, and only when necessary." "And this qualifies," I said. "It does," she agreed. I hesitated for a moment. "Then I need to get it back," I said. "Yes," she said simply, "but not by asking." I met her eyes, then how Linda leaned back slightly in her chair. "You go in as if nothing has changed," she said. "You don't accuse. You don't confront. You don't give Vanessa any reason to believe you've seen what she's doing." And while I'm there, I asked. "You observe," she said. "And when the opportunity presents itself, you take back what's yours." It sounded simple. But it wasn't, because this wasn't just about retrieving an object. It was about stepping into a space where I had been quietly diminished and choosing to stand differently. "I can do that," I said. "I know you can," Linda replied. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small notepad, sliding it toward me. "There's one more thing," she said. "If what Robert left is as important as I suspect, we'll need to document everything the moment you retrieve it. No delays, no uncertainty." I nodded. "Understood." "And Wilma," she added, her tone softening slightly, "whatever you find. It doesn't change who you are. It just gives you more clarity about what others have chosen to do. I appreciated that, more than she probably realized, because this wasn't just about uncovering a plan. It was about facing what that plan said about the people involved, about my son, about the life I thought I understood. I left Linda's office with a sense of direction I hadn't felt in a long time. Not rushed, not overwhelmed, just focused. By the time I pulled into Michael's driveway that afternoon, I was ready. The house looked the same as it always did, clean polished, carefully maintained. But now I saw it differently, not as a place where I visited, but as a place where something had been unfolding quietly just beneath the surface. I rang the doorbell. Vanessa answered. "Wilma," she said, her expression briefly surprised before smoothing into something more composed. "We weren't expecting you." "I was in the area," I said lightly. "I thought I'd stop by." She hesitated for just a second, then stepped aside. "Of course," she said. "Come in." The house was quieter than it had been the day before. No guests, no laughter, just the soft hum of something playing in the background, music maybe. "Michael's out," she added as I stepped inside. "He had a meeting." "I see," I said. "That was fine. In some ways, better." Vanessa closed the door behind me, her movements precise. "Can I get you anything?" she asked. "No, thank you," I replied. "I won't stay long." Her eyes lingered on me for a moment, as if she were trying to read something. Then she smiled. "Well, everything's still out from yesterday," she said, gesturing toward the dining room. "I was just about to start putting it away. Perfect." "I can help," I said. She paused. "Oh, you don't have to." "I'd like to," I said gently. There was no edge in my voice, no challenge, just intention. After a moment, she nodded. "All right," she said. "If you're sure." We walked into the dining room together. The china was still there, not arranged as carefully as it had been during the brunch, but still laid out across the table. And there it was, the serving plate, at the center, exactly where I remembered it. I felt something steady inside me, not nerves, not fear, just awareness. Vanessa moved toward the side of the table, beginning to stack smaller plates. I stepped toward the center, toward that one piece. "I'll start here," I said. "Sounds good," she replied, not looking up. My hands moved slowly, deliberately, one plate at a time, stacking, lifting, placing. Normal. Routine. Nothing unusual. Until I reached it, the serving plate. I picked it up carefully. It felt the same weight, the same balance. But now I knew. I turned it slightly, just enough to feel along the underside with my fingers. There. A seam. So subtle it would be invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it. My breath stayed steady, my expression unchanged. Vanessa glanced up briefly. "Be careful with that one," she said. "It's probably the most valuable piece." I met her eyes. "I know," I said. Then I smiled, soft, calm, certain, because for the first time since this began, I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was holding the one thing she didn't know existed, and whatever Robert had hidden inside it was about to change everything. I didn't open the plate there, not in Vanessa's dining room, not with her moving just a few feet away, stacking bowls and humming softly as if nothing in the world was out of place. If there was one thing I understood now, it was this: timing mattered just as much as truth. So I held the plate the way I had held it 100 times before, steady and unremarkable, and placed it gently on top of the stack I was building. "Do you want me to take these to the cabinet?" I asked. Vanessa glanced over, then nodded. "That would be great," she said. "I'll finish here." "Perfect." I lifted the stack, careful, balanced, practiced, and walked toward the kitchen instead of the dining room cabinet. Vanessa didn't question it. Why would she? To her, I was still exactly who I had always been. Predictable, harmless, trusting. I set the plates down on the kitchen counter just beside the sink. The laptop was gone now, closed, removed, hidden somewhere else. Of course it was, but I didn't need it anymore. I had what I came for. "Do you mind if I rinse a few of these?" I called out, keeping my tone casual. "Go ahead," she replied. "I haven't gotten to them yet." I turned on the water, letting it run just long enough to create sound, just enough to cover the subtle click I hoped I would hear next. My fingers moved under the edge of the serving plate again. There. The seam. I pressed gently. Nothing. I adjusted my grip, remembering the way Robert used to handle things, never forcing, always precise. Think about why we kept them. His words echoed in my mind. Not just what they were, but why. I turned the plate slightly, angling it under the light. Then I saw it. A tiny indentation so small it looked like a natural variation in the glaze. Not a flaw. A key. I pressed it. Softly. A quiet, almost inaudible click followed. My heart skipped. The underside shifted. Just enough. I kept my body positioned so that if Vanessa glanced in, she would see nothing more than me holding a plate under running water. Slowly, carefully, I turned the plate over and eased the bottom panel open just a fraction. Inside, something small. Wrapped. My breath caught in my throat. Not jewelry, not money. Something flatter, deliberate. I slid it out just enough to see the edge. A key. And beneath it, paper. Folded. Old. My fingers trembled for just a moment, not from fear, but from the weight of what this meant. Robert had left this for me. Not as a memory, as a safeguard. I closed the panel quickly, pressing it back into place until it clicked shut again. Seamless, invisible, exactly as it had been before. Then I reached for a dish towel, drying the plate with steady hands. "Everything okay in there?" Vanessa called out. "Just taking my time," I replied. "You know me." She laughed lightly. "Yes, I do." But she didn't. Not anymore. I picked up the plate, holding it with the same casual care as the others, and turned off the water. Then I did something simple. Something ordinary. I set it aside. Not on the stack, not with the others, just slightly separate. "Why don't I take this one home with me?" I said, stepping back into the dining room. "It's always been my favorite." Vanessa looked up, a flicker of hesitation crossing her face. "Just for a second." Then, "Of course," she said. "It's yours. Yours." The words sounded different now, more cautious, less certain. I nodded. "Thank you," I said. We finished clearing the table together, the rest of the china packed carefully into boxes for transport. Vanessa moved efficiently, her earlier confidence still present, but quieter now. More watchful. I could feel it. She was sensing something. Not the truth, but the shift. When we were done, I picked up my purse and the serving plate. "I'll take this with me," I said. "I'll bring it back once everything else is settled." She opened her mouth, then paused. Actually, she said, her tone carefully neutral. It might be better to keep everything together. For consistency. Consistency. I met her eyes. I've kept it consistent for 47 years, I said gently. I think I can manage one plate. Silence stretched between us. Then she smiled. Again. Polished. Controlled. Of course, she said. Whatever makes you comfortable. Comfortable. That wasn't what this was about. But I didn't correct her. Thank you, I said again. As I walked toward the door, I could feel her watching me. Not casually, not politely, closely, trying to understand what had changed, trying to measure something she couldn't quite see. Good. Let her wonder. Michael wasn't home when I left. Part of me was relieved. Part of me knew that conversation was coming and that it would be harder than anything I had faced so far, but not today. Today was about something else. I got into my car and placed the plate carefully on the seat beside me. For a moment, I just sat there, my hands resting on the steering wheel, my breath steady but deeper than usual. Then I picked up the plate again. This time, there was no need to hide. No need to pretend. I turned it over, found the seam, pressed the indentation. Click. The panel opened easily. I removed the contents fully this time. The key. Small. Brass. Old-fashioned. And the paper. Folded twice. Yellowed slightly with age. I unfolded it slowly. Inside, not a letter. Not exactly. A set of instructions, written in Robert's handwriting. Precise. Clear. If you are reading this, it means something has changed. My chest tightened. There is a safety deposit box under your name at First National Bank. The key you are holding will open it. I stared at the words, my mind racing. A bank. A box. Something more. Inside, you will find everything you need to protect yourself. Documents, accounts, records I chose not to keep in the house. Everything you need. I closed my eyes for a moment. Robert hadn't just prepared for this. He had anticipated it. Not Vanessa specifically, but the possibility, the vulnerability, the moment when trust might be tested. I opened my eyes again, reading the final line. Use it when you need clarity, not when you feel afraid. A slow breath left my lungs. Clarity, not fear. I folded the paper carefully and placed it back beside the key. For a moment, I simply sat there, the weight of it all settling into place. This wasn't just about stopping something. It was about stepping into something. A version of myself that Robert had believed I could become, even if I hadn't seen it yet. I looked down at the plate in my hands. What once held dinners, now held truth. And not just any truth. The kind that doesn't just reveal what others have done, but what you are capable of doing next. I placed the key and paper into my purse, securing them carefully. Then I set the plate back on the seat. My hands returned to the steering wheel. Steady. Certain. Because now, I wasn't just reacting to a plan. I was holding the one thing that could dismantle it, and the next step was clear. The bank. I didn't go straight home. I didn't go back to Linda's office either. Instead, I drove. Not aimlessly, but slowly, deliberately letting the rhythm of the road steady my thoughts. The key rested in my purse like something alive, something that carried more weight than its size suggested. Every few minutes, my hand drifted toward it just to feel its presence, to remind myself that this was real. A safety deposit box. Robert had left me more than memories. He had left me a plan. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of First National Bank, the afternoon sun had shifted into that softer golden light that always made everything feel just a little more honest. I sat in the car for a moment looking at the building. Simple, unassuming. Exactly the kind of place Robert would have chosen. Clarity, not fear, I whispered to myself. Then I stepped out. Inside the bank was quiet. A few customers at the counters, a low murmur of conversation, the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead. It felt ordinary. But nothing about this moment was ordinary. A young teller greeted me with a polite smile. "Good afternoon, ma'am. How can I help you today? I'd like to access a safety deposit box," I said. Her expression shifted slightly, professional, attentive. "Of course. May I see your ID?" I handed it over, my fingers steady. She typed something into her computer, glanced at the screen, then back at me. "Yes, Mrs. Hayes. We do have a box under your name. I'll have someone assist you." Under your name. Not shared. Not transferred. Mine. A few minutes later, a man in his 40s approached, introducing himself as the vault manager. His demeanor was calm, efficient. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "if you'll follow me." I nodded and walked with him through a secured door, down a short hallway, and into the vault. The air inside was cooler, stiller. Rows upon rows of small metal boxes lined the walls, each one identical from a distance, each one holding someone's version of security. He stopped in front of one near the middle. "This is yours," he said. He inserted his key first, then stepped back. "You may use your key now. I'll give you some privacy." I waited until he turned away before reaching into my purse. The key felt heavier now, not physically, but in meaning. I inserted it into the lock. For a brief second, my hand paused. Then I turned it. Click. The box released. I slid it out slowly, carrying it to the small table in the corner of the vault room. For a moment, I just stood there looking at it. This was it. Whatever Robert had chosen to protect, whatever he had believed I might need one day, was inside. I took a breath and opened it. Inside were several items neatly arranged, not cluttered, not overwhelming, intentional. At the top was a thick envelope labeled in Robert's handwriting for Wilma, "Read first." My chest tightened as I picked it up. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter. Longer than the one I had found at home. More detailed. "Wilma," it began, "if you've come this far, it means you're facing something I hoped you never would." My eyes moved quickly across the page. I didn't leave these things hidden because I expected the worst. I left them because I know how easily trust can be misunderstood, and how quietly people can begin to take more than they should. I swallowed. He had known. Not who, but how. Everything in this box is here to give you control. Not over others, but over your own choices. Control. The word echoed again. "Use it wisely," he wrote. "And remember, clarity will always serve you better than fear." I lowered the letter slowly, my hands steady but my heart full. He had trusted me, not just to find this, but to understand it. I set the letter aside and looked at the rest of the contents. There were documents organized, labeled, financial statements from accounts I didn't recognize, investment portfolios, legal papers outlining ownership structures. One folder in particular caught my attention. Property and asset protection. I opened it. Inside were detailed records of everything Robert had structured before he passed. The house, the accounts, even the china. Protected. Not just emotionally, legally. My breath caught as I read further. Certain assets had been placed under specific conditions, conditions that required my direct authorization for any transfer, sale, or reassignment. No one else. Not Michael. Not anyone acting on his behalf. And certainly not Vanessa. I leaned back slightly, the weight of it settling in. She had been building a plan around something she didn't fully understand, around a system she couldn't access, because Robert had made sure of it. I reached for another document, this one thinner, more recent. It was a notice prepared but not filed, a legal statement reinforcing my sole authority over all personal and shared assets, unsigned, waiting for me. I closed my eyes for a moment. This wasn't just protection. This was preparation for a choice, not whether I could act, but how. When I opened my eyes again, I felt different. Not overwhelmed, not uncertain, clear. I gathered the documents carefully, placing them back into the box in the order I had found them. All except one. The notice. I held it in my hands, reading it one more time. Then I folded it and placed it into my purse. I would take this to Linda. We would decide the next step together. But one thing was already certain. Vanessa's plan was built on an assumption that I was unaware, that I was unprotected, that I would remain passive. All three were no longer true. I returned the remaining contents to the box, slid it back into its slot, and locked it securely. When I stepped out of the vault, the manager looked up. "All set?" he asked. "Yes," I said. My voice was calm. "Certain." "Thank you." I walked out of the bank into the late afternoon light, the air feeling different against my skin. Not lighter, but clearer. I got into my car and sat there for a moment, my hands resting on the steering wheel again. But this time, there was no hesitation, because now I knew. Not just what Vanessa had been doing, but what I was capable of doing in response. I reached into my purse and touched the folded document, the one that could shift everything. Then I picked up my phone. I didn't scroll this time. I went straight to the contact. Michael. The phone rang once. Twice. Then, "Hey, Mom," he answered. His voice sounded tired, uncertain. "Michael," I said, my tone steady. "Yeah, we need to talk," I said. A pause. About what he asked. I looked out through the windshield, the sunlight stretching across the road ahead. "About what happens next," I said. Silence. Then, "Okay," he said quietly. When he asked, I didn't hesitate. Tonight I replied, because now I wasn't walking into that house as someone being managed, or overlooked, or quietly replaced. I was walking in with clarity, and this time the truth wouldn't need a reflection to be seen. I chose the evening carefully. Not too late, not too early. A time when the day had settled, when distractions were fewer, when conversations had nowhere to hide. When I pulled into Michael's driveway, the house was lit softly from the inside. Not the bright, polished glow of a gathering, but something quieter. Still. He opened the door before I even knocked. "Mom," he said, stepping aside. "Come in." His voice held something I hadn't heard in a long time. Uncertainty. I walked inside, my eyes moving naturally through the space. The dining room had been cleared. The china was gone from the table, boxed, I assumed, or perhaps already moved somewhere else. Vanessa stood near the kitchen, her posture straight, her expression composed but not relaxed. She had been waiting too. "Wilma," she said. "Michael said you wanted to talk." "I do," I replied. "No small talk. No pretense. Just truth." Michael gestured toward the living room. "Let's sit," he said. We did. 3 people. One conversation that had been building long before any of us were ready to admit it. I sat across from them, placing my purse gently beside me. For a moment, no one spoke. Then I began. "I went to the bank today," I said. Michael's brow furrowed. "The bank," he repeated. Vanessa didn't move. But I saw it. The smallest shift in her shoulders. I accessed a safety deposit box Robert left for me. I continued. Silence. Michael looked confused. "I didn't know there was a box," he said. "I didn't either," I replied. "Not until yesterday." Vanessa finally spoke. "And what was in it?" she asked. Her tone was calm, careful. But underneath it, tension. I held her gaze. "Everything I needed," I said. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she leaned back slightly, crossing one leg over the other. "That sounds reassuring," she said. "It is," I replied. Another pause. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out the folded document. I didn't hand it to them immediately. I let it sit in my hands for a moment. Let the weight of it exist in the room. "This," I said, "is a legal statement confirming my sole authority over all my assets. My home, my accounts, everything." Michael leaned forward slightly. "Mom, I know," I said, gently cutting him off before he could finish. Because this wasn't about what he intended. It was about what had been allowed. I turned my attention back to Vanessa. "But I think it's important that we're all clear on something," I continued. Her eyes met mine, steady, unblinking. "I'm not stepping aside," I said. The words were simple, but they carried something heavier than volume, something final. Vanessa's expression didn't change, not at first. Then she smiled, a small, controlled smile. "Wilma," she said, "I don't think anyone expected you to." "Didn't they?" I asked. Her gaze held mine. "For someone who wasn't expecting it," I said, "you've done quite a bit of planning." Michael looked between us. "What does that mean?" he asked. I turned slightly toward him. "It means," I said calmly, "that your wife has been preparing to sell my property." His face went still. "That's not," he started. "It is," I said. Then I looked back at Vanessa. I saw the listing I added, reflected in the serving plate. That landed. I saw it in her eyes. Not shock, not guilt, but calculation. She hadn't expected that. Not that detail, not that angle. "Reflections can be misleading," she said. "They can," I agreed, "but not when they show exactly what's there." Silence. Michael's voice broke through it. "Vanessa, is that true?" he asked. She turned to him slowly. "I've been exploring options," she said. "That's all." "Options," he repeated. "For the future," she replied. "For us." "For us?" he echoed. "Or for you?" The room shifted, subtly, but unmistakably. Vanessa's posture straightened. "I'm trying to protect what we have," she said. "By selling what isn't yours," I asked. Her eyes snapped back to me. "That's not fair," she said. "Isn't it?" I replied. Then I leaned forward slightly, my voice still calm but firmer now. "Listing my china under estate liquidation isn't protection," I said. "It's assumption." Michael looked at her again. "Estate liquidation," he said quietly. She hesitated. Just for a moment. Then, "It was a draft," she said. "Nothing finalized." "But it existed," I said. She didn't deny that. Because she couldn't. And the power of attorney. I continued. That one hit harder. Michael's head turned sharply. What he asked. Vanessa exhaled slowly. I was researching, she said, for what he asked. In case something happened, she replied. In case your mother needed help managing things. I tilted my head slightly. Without asking me, I said, I was going to, she said. When I asked, she didn't answer. Because there was no answer that would make sense. The room fell quiet again, but this time, the silence wasn't uncertain. It was revealing. Michael leaned back, his hands pressing against his knees. I didn't know about any of this, he said. I know, I replied. Vanessa looked at him. I was trying to help, she said. He shook his head slowly. No, he said. You were trying to control something that wasn't yours. The words hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. Vanessa's composure cracked just slightly, not dramatically, but enough. You don't understand, she said, her voice tightening. I've been holding everything together, your finances, your image, your future. By lying, he asked. I didn't lie, she said quickly. You told me Mom was considering assisted living, he said. Her silence said everything. I watched them not with satisfaction, but with clarity. This wasn't just about exposure. It was about consequence. I reached for the final piece, the one Robert had left me, the one Vanessa had never seen. I stood slowly and walked toward the dining room. They followed, without speaking. The boxes of china sat neatly stacked near the cabinet. I opened one carefully and removed the serving plate. Holding it in my hands, I turned back to them. This plate, I said, has always been at the center of our table. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. And now, she asked. Now, I said, it's at the center of something else. I turned it over, found the indentation, pressed it. Click. The panel opened. Michael's breath caught. Vanessa stepped forward. What is that? She asked. I reached inside and removed the contents. The key. The folded paper. The truth. Something my husband left for me, I said, for when things became complicated. I looked at her, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with something stronger, understanding. You weren't the first person to think ahead, I said quietly. Her face changed. Finally. Not composed. Not controlled. But exposed. Because in that moment, she realized something. She hadn't been planning around me. She had been planning around a version of me that no longer existed. And now, that version was gone. For a moment after the panel clicked open, no one moved. Not Michael, not Vanessa, not even me. It was as if the room itself had paused to understand what had just happened, how something so small, so ordinary, could hold something so undeniable. Michael was the first to speak. What is that? He asked again, his voice quieter this time. I looked at him, then down at the items in my hand. A key, I said. And instructions your father left for me. Vanessa stepped closer. Her composure no longer quite as seamless as before. What kind of instructions, she asked. Her tone was careful, but I could hear it now, the shift beneath it. Not curiosity, urgency. I met her eyes. The kind that make it very clear what belongs to me, I said. Silence followed. Heavy. Michael ran a hand over his face, exhaling slowly. Mom, why didn't we know about this? He asked, I softened slightly at his voice. Because it wasn't meant for everyone to know, I said. It was meant for when I needed it. And you think that's now? He asked. I held his gaze. Yes, I said. There was no hesitation left in me. Vanessa crossed her arms, her posture shifting from controlled to defensive. This doesn't change anything, she said. I turned to her. It changes everything, I replied. Her eyes flashed. How, she asked. You still have a house to maintain. Expenses, responsibilities. You can't just pretend those realities don't exist. I'm not pretending, I said calmly. I'm choosing what she pressed. Choosing not to hand over control of my life to someone who never asked for it in the first place, I said. That landed. Harder than anything else had. Michael looked between us, his expression strained. Vanessa, he said slowly, you should have talked to me. I was trying to protect us, she insisted, from what he asked. She hesitated. Then, from instability, she said, from uncertainty, from having everything tied up in one place with no plan. I let out a quiet breath. There was a plan, I said. They both looked at me. There always was. I continued. You just weren't part of it. Vanessa's jaw tightened. That's convenient, she said. No, I replied. It's intentional. I stepped forward slightly, placing the key and folded paper on the table between us. My husband didn't build his life on convenience, I said. He built it on foresight. Michael looked down at the items, then back up at me. What's in the box, he asked. Protection, I said. For what he pressed. For moments like this, I replied. The room fell quiet again. But this time the silence felt different. Not tense. Resolved. Vanessa looked at the plate still in my hand. You're overreacting, she said finally. All I did was look into options. I tilted my head slightly. Options don't involve listing someone else's property without their consent, I said. It wasn't listed, she snapped. It was a draft. A draft that described it as inherited, I said. She didn't respond. Because she couldn't. Michael turned to her again. Why would you write that? He asked. She exhaled sharply. Because it's what would eventually happen, she said. Everything gets passed down. Eventually, I said. Yes, she replied. Eventually. And you decided to move that timeline forward without me, I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked at Michael. I was thinking about our future, she said. Michael shook his head slowly. No, he said. You were thinking about control. The word hung there. Clear. Unavoidable. Vanessa's expression hardened. I've been managing everything, she said. Your finances, your decisions, your stability, and mine, I asked. She looked at me. Yes, she said. Yours too. There it was. Finally. No more soft language. No more careful phrasing. Just truth. I nodded slowly. Thank you for saying that out loud, I said. She frowned. What does that mean? She asked. It means I don't have to wonder anymore, I replied. Michael stepped back slightly as if the weight of the conversation had finally caught up with him. I didn't see this, he said quietly. I looked at him. I know, I said. That's not an excuse, he added. No, I agreed. It's not. Vanessa turned toward him, her voice rising slightly. So now you're just going to stand there and let her paint me as the villain she asked. I'm not painting anything I said calmly. I'm describing what happened. You're twisting it, she said. No. Michael said quietly. She's not. That stopped her. Completely. She looked at him as if she didn't recognize him. You're choosing her side, she asked. I'm choosing the truth, he replied. Another silence, this one heavier than all the others. Vanessa's shoulders dropped slightly, not in defeat, but in realization. The ground she had been standing on was shifting. I picked up the key and the paper again, placing them carefully back into my purse. This conversation isn't about sides, I said. It's about boundaries. She looked at me. And what are those boundaries? She asked. I met her gaze. You don't make decisions about my life, I said. You don't access my property, and you don't build plans that depend on my absence. Each word was steady, measured, final. Michael closed his eyes briefly as if absorbing it all. Vanessa didn't look away. And if I disagree, she asked. I held her gaze. Then you'll have to decide what matters more, I said. Control or honesty. She didn't answer, because for the first time since I had known her, she didn't have one ready. I turned toward Michael. I'm taking the china home, I said. He nodded immediately. Okay, he said. No hesitation. No deflection. Just agreement. Vanessa didn't stop me. Didn't argue. Didn't even speak, because she understood something now. Not everything, but enough. But I began gathering the boxes one by one, moving with the same care I always had. Only now, there was something different in my hands. Not just memory, not just habit, authority. When I reached the door, I paused. Not for long, just enough to say one last thing. I meant what I said I told them. This isn't over. Michael nodded. I know, he said. Vanessa said nothing. But her silence spoke louder than anything she had said all day. I stepped outside, the evening air cool against my face. The sky had darkened, the first stars just beginning to appear. For the first time in days, I felt something settle. Not relief, not victory, something quieter. Clarity. Because whatever came next wouldn't be built on assumptions, or silence, or quiet control. It would be built on something stronger, truth. And I was finally ready to stand in it. Bringing the china back into my house felt different than I expected. I thought it would feel like reclaiming something that had been taken, like restoring order, like putting things back where they belonged. But it wasn't just that. It felt like I was seeing everything for the first time again. I set the boxes down carefully in the dining room one by one, my movements slow and deliberate. The cabinet stood open, waiting not as something that had been emptied, but as something that had endured. I didn't rush to unpack. Instead, I stood there for a moment looking at the space. The same room, the same light, but not the same woman, because something had shifted in me that couldn't be undone. Not by time, not by apology, not by anything. I began unwrapping the pieces, slowly placing each plate back into its place with care. Not out of habit, but out of intention. Each one felt different in my hands now. Not fragile, not sentimental. Grounded. As if I finally understood that their value wasn't in what they were worth, but in what they represented. When I reached the serving plate, I paused, holding it there just above the shelf. For years it had been the centerpiece of something beautiful, and then for a moment it had become the center of something painful. Now, it was something else entirely. A reminder. I placed it back in the cabinet slightly forward, just as it had always been. Not hidden, not emphasized, simply present. That evening, I didn't call anyone. I didn't reach out to Michael. I didn't speak to Linda. I let the silence exist, not as avoidance, but as space. Because I knew what was coming next wouldn't be solved in one conversation. It would take time, and more importantly, it would take truth that didn't bend under pressure. The next afternoon, Michael came over. He didn't call ahead. He didn't text. He just showed up. I heard the knock and already knew it was him. There's a certain weight to a knock when someone doesn't know what they're about to say. I opened the door. He stood there, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly tense. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Hi," I replied. I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, his eyes moving through the house in a way I hadn't seen before. Not distracted, not casual, present. "I saw your car," he said. "I figured you were home." "I am," I replied. We stood in the living room for a moment, neither of us sitting right away. Then he exhaled. "I don't know where to start," he admitted. I nodded. "Then don't start with an answer," I said. "Start with the truth." He looked at me, his expression softening slightly. "I should have paid attention," he said. "Yes," I replied. "I should have asked more questions." He continued. "Yes," I said again, "and I shouldn't have assumed that everything Vanessa said was automatically right," he added. I held his gaze. "That's a good place to begin," I said. He nodded slowly, then sat down. I joined him, leaving space between us. Not distance, but clarity. "I didn't see what she was doing," he said quietly. "Not fully. But you felt something I said." He hesitated. "Yes," he admitted. "And you ignored it," I said. He nodded. "I thought it would go away," he said. "Or that I was just overthinking things." I let that sit for a moment. "Sometimes we ignore things because we don't want to lose what we have," I said. He looked at me. "Is that what I did?" he asked. "Yes," I said. And now he asked. I took a breath. "Now you decide what matters more," I said. He looked down at his hands. "I don't want to lose my marriage," he said. "I understand that," I replied. "But I don't want to lose you either," he added. I softened slightly. "You're not going to lose me," I said. He looked up. "But things are going to change," I continued. He nodded. "I know." There was a long pause. Then he spoke again. "She didn't think of it as stealing," he said. "I know," I replied. "She thought she was organizing things," he added. "Control often feels like organization to the person holding it," I said. He let out a quiet breath. "That doesn't make it right," he said. "No," I agreed. "It doesn't." He leaned back slightly, his expression tired but clearer. "What happens now?" he asked. I considered that for a moment. Now I said we move forward honestly. "And Vanessa?" he asked. "That depends on her," I replied. He frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I said if she can acknowledge what she did, truly acknowledge it, then there's a path forward. And if she can't," he asked. I met his eyes. "Then you'll have a harder decision to make," I said. He didn't answer right away, because he understood. This wasn't about me forcing anything. It was about him seeing clearly, for the first time. "I don't know if she will," he admitted. "That's something you'll have to find out," I said. He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not rushed. Not automatic." Real. I know, I replied, and for the first time in this entire situation, I believed him. Not because he said the words, but because he understood why they mattered. We sat there a while longer talking not about the past, but about what comes next. Practical things, honest things, things that didn't avoid the truth. When he finally stood to leave, he hesitated at the doorway. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course," I replied. He glanced toward the dining room. "The plate," he said. "What your dad left in it. Was that really for this?" I followed his gaze, then looked back at him. "It was for whatever moment required me to see clearly," I said. He nodded. "That makes sense," he said. Then he paused. "I'm glad you found it," he added. I smiled softly. "So am I," said. After he left, I walked into the dining room again. The cabinet stood closed, now the china safely inside. Unmoved. Untouched. But not unchanged, because I wasn't the same person who had placed it there all those years ago, and that mattered more than anything. I reached out and opened the cabinet slightly, just enough to see the serving plate resting where it belonged. Not as a secret, not as a weapon, but as a reminder. That clarity doesn't come from what you're given. It comes from what you're willing to see. And now, I was finally seeing everything. The house felt different in the days that followed. Not quieter, not louder, just settled. Like something that had been shifting beneath the surface for a long time had finally found its place. I didn't rush into anything. I met with Linda again, of course. We reviewed every document from the safety deposit box, made copies, secured what needed to be secured. I signed the notice Robert had prepared, reinforcing my authority over everything that was mine legally, clearly, without room for interpretation. It wasn't dramatic. There were no raised voices, no courtroom scenes, just quiet, deliberate decisions. The kind that hold more power than anything said in anger. Linda looked at me when we finished. "You're handling this exactly the way he hoped you would," she said. I smiled faintly. "I think I'm finally understanding what that means," I replied. She nodded. "Clarity," she said. "Yes," I said. "Clarity." Michael called a few days later. Not to apologize again. Not to explain. Just to ask if he could come over. This time I said yes without hesitation. When he arrived, he looked different. Not broken. Not defeated. But aware. That's the word I would use. Aware of what had happened. Aware of what it meant. And most importantly, aware of his place in it. We sat at the dining table. The china was out again. Not for show, not for tradition, just because I chose to use it. "That looks familiar," he said, glancing at the plates. "It is," I replied. He nodded, his fingers resting lightly on the edge of one. "I forgot how it felt," he said quietly. "How what felt?" I asked. "Eating here," he said, "like this." I watched him for a moment. "You didn't forget," I said. "You just stopped noticing." He nodded slowly. "That sounds about right." We ate in silence for a few minutes. Not uncomfortable, just honest. Then he spoke. "I talked to Vanessa," he said. I set my fork down. And I asked. He exhaled. "She doesn't think she did anything wrong," he said. I wasn't surprised. "She thinks she was being practical," he added. I gave a small knowing nod. "And you?" I asked. He looked at me. "I think she crossed a line," he said. There it was. Clear, simple, true. "And what does that mean for you?" I asked. He hesitated. Then I'm not sure yet, he admitted. That's honest, I said. I told her things have to change, he continued. That we can't make decisions about your life like that. And how did she respond? I asked. He let out a short, humorless breath. She said I was choosing you over her, he said. And are you? I asked. He met my eyes. I'm choosing what's right, he said. I held his gaze for a moment, then nodded. That's all I've ever wanted, I said. He looked down at his plate again, then back up. I don't know what happens next, he said. You don't have to, I replied. He frowned slightly. What do you mean? I said you don't have to solve everything at once. You just have to stop ignoring what you already know. He sat with that. Let it settle. Then nodded. Okay, he said. We finished the meal, slowly talking about small things. After that, work the weather, a neighbor who had finally fixed their fence. Normal things, but underneath it all, something had shifted. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. After he left, I cleaned the table myself, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Each plate returned to the cabinet felt like a quiet affirmation, not of the past, but of the present, of where I stood now, of what I understood. When I reached the serving plate, I paused again. It had become something more than it once was. Not just a memory, not just a container, but a turning point. I held it for a moment, then placed it back in its spot, exactly where it belonged. That evening, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the light fade from the sky, the same way I had done so many times before. But this time, I wasn't waiting for anything. I wasn't wondering what I had missed. I wasn't questioning my place in my own life. I knew it, fully, completely, and that made all the difference. Robert had once told me that the most important things in life aren't always the ones you can see right away. Sometimes they reveal themselves slowly, through reflection, through pressure, through moments you never expected to face. I smiled softly to myself. He had been right, not just about the plate, but about everything. Because in the end, it wasn't the china that mattered. It wasn't the key. It wasn't even the plan. It was the moment I chose to see clearly, to stop assuming, to stop softening what needed to be understood, and to stand fully in what was mine. Not just my home, not just my belongings, but my voice, my boundaries, my life. I took a sip of my tea, the warmth settling in my chest, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something simple, something steady, peace, not because everything was perfect, but because everything was honest. And that was enough. Sometimes the most painful moments in life don't come from strangers, but from the people we trust the most. And often the betrayal isn't loud or obvious. It's quiet, subtle, wrapped in words like help practical or for your own good. But here's the truth I learned. Love without boundaries becomes permission. Trust without awareness becomes vulnerability. And silence over time becomes agreement. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean you stop loving your family. It means you love yourself enough not to disappear inside that love. There will always be people who see your life as something to manage, improve, or reshape to fit their own version of what's best. But your life is not a project. It's not an asset. And it's certainly not something that becomes negotiable just because time has passed. The real strength comes not from what you own, but from what you understand. And once you truly see what's happening around you, you can never go back to not knowing. So I want to ask you something. Have you ever had a moment where something small revealed a much bigger truth? Maybe a comment, a look, a situation that didn't feel right at first, but later made perfect sense. If you have, I'd love to hear your story. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, what time it is for you right now, and what this story made you feel. And if this story resonated with you in any way, don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep sharing these moments of truth together. You're not alone, and your clarity matters more than you think.